this thing that I'm always inveighing about ego is, I think, very true. We are so similar that any one of us could stand in for any of the other of us. So this thing we spend our entire life creating called my unique personality is a yuppie indulgence, just like the BMW and the Picasso print and all the rest of it. Nobody is really special. Intelligence is special when compared to stupidity, but no one holds the patent on intelligence. And I don't believe that intelligence is something that you're born with. Intelligence is something that you learn. Everybody starts out stupid, and it's just some people remain that way because of the failure to inculcate curiosity. Curiosity is the great virtue, and the reason I'm into psychedelics to the degree that I am is because I'm interested in the world, and it's taken me in many, many directions, from tropical butterflies to rocket building to paleontology to surrealism to tantra to psychedelics. And the reason I'm not giving a lecture somewhere in the world today on butterflies or tantra is because psychedelics are more interesting than those things. Each thing is a step to something else. You know, when you talk to shamans, psychedelic or otherwise, there's a lot of emphasis on what they call the way of the ancestors. And this is a good New Age phrase, and it sort of has a vaguely furry and friendly sound to it. But what is the way of the ancestors really? To my mind, the way to think about yourself is that you are the front end of a genetic shockwave moving through the genetic environment. And if, as I sit and talk to you, I scratch my head, and let's assume I am pest-free for a moment, then this gesture is part of the way of my ancestors. You know, I had a grandfather, a great-grandfather, a second cousin who did this. Everything about you is inherited. Nothing about you is uniquely yours, unless you have some lethal mutation that has sprung into being in your lifetime and is probably going to plant you. But everything serviceable about you is inherited from the past. So not only are we not different from each other, but we are not different greatly from the people who preceded us. And on a scale of 10,000 years, the differences are minuscule to non-existent. So part of the political awareness that comes out of psychedelics is the defocusing of the sense of self, strangely enough. And people, this is a tricky message to put out, because people say, well, are you saying then that we should be perfectly comfortable in some kind of human anthill? Is this a kind of crypto-fascist idea? I don't think so. It is not true that the finest achievement of Western civilization is the democratically empowered individual ego. That is not the finest flower of our civilization. The finest flower of our civilization, to my mind, is the ideal of charity, community, and a generalized sense of human dignity that is often somewhat limited in its expression in other societies. I mean, when Pakal went to his tomb, if you read the description in the Forest of Kings, at the end of a very elaborate ceremony, and almost as an afterthought, his inheritor sacrifices 4 captives before he climbs back up the stairs. And it's almost like, oh my God, we've had this 2-hour ceremony, I've been wearing this jade pectoral, I'm sweating like a pig, now I have to kill 4 people before I can take a shower and change clothes. And then he does it. This is not a society where the generalized values of human worth and community were very highly expressed. Okay, so that's one point. Then this other point, which is more my special. I mean, I feel uncomfortable preaching a dogma of moral awareness because I'm perfectly aware that my behavior could not survive any kind of thorough scrutiny at all. And I revel in it and seek not to change. I figure warning people is all you have to do. You don't have to reform your character.
Yes, if I listen to you, what you're saying is pure Dzogchen.
Oh, good. I'm glad there's some traditional backing. But the other point that I wanted to make, and this is my personal opinion, but held fiercely, is that if we say that psychedelics expand consciousness, then we mean something more than just that you're aware of the gradients of color or the subtleties at dinner in conversation. What expansion of consciousness means in a historical framework is ideas. Civilization and uncivilization have all been built out of ideas. Urbanism, monotheism, the sum of the square of the hypotenuse equals the sum of the square of the other 2 sides, the keyed arch, the ratchet, the pulley, ideas. And again, I would challenge you, as we look at the 20th century, where are the ideas that the psychedelic community can lay clear claim to? Was Einstein loaded? Was Marx? Was Freud? Were the people who fractionated DNA the first time? Were the people who went to the moon? Were the people who propounded fascism? Where are the ideas? We cannot move, and I think I said this in one of my other lectures, we cannot move any faster than the language that we evolve, and we cannot move into the future any faster than the ideas that we generate. And right now, in the aftermath of the collapse of Marxism, no critique is being carried out of the dominant ideology that rules the planet, which is market economics, capitalism, consumerism. There is no coherent critique being brought forth against these things. Now, we have a fragmented opposition to the reigning paradigm of the marketplace, and the opposition names itself various ways. There's feminism, there's anti-racism, there is ecological consciousness, and there is psychedelic awareness. To my mind, one of the great failures in the political dialogue at the end of the century is that these groups of people have not made common cause. Why is it so hard to explain to a feminist why they should be an ecologist? Why is it so hard to explain to both of those parties why they should take psychedelics? The opposition to the reigning paradigm of market economy and product fetishism is woefully fragmented. What does gay rights have to do with racism? What does that have to do with the destruction of the rainforest? And what does that have to do with the manufacture of unnecessary products with toxic byproducts? Well, the answer is everything. Everything. Because what we're talking about here is the quality of the human experience of the living world. And you know, John Donne said, every man's death diminishes me. Every person's suffering diminishes your happiness. I personally have found it in the last several years, and I don't know whether it's because of my personal circumstance or the larger picture, but it becomes harder and harder to take very large doses of psychedelics because there's a part of the trip which I call the world news. And the world news is hard to put up with. And the visions, the images of the forced rape concentration camps in Serbia, the distended bellies of the children of Somalia, and then intercut with the vast and mindless wealth of the high-tech industrial democracies. It's a picture of human self-hatred and mismanagement, and the consequences are global. Every man's death, every person's suffering diminishes the quality of human experience generally. How much misery can there be in the world before no one can take psychedelics? Because it simply inducts you into an awareness too horrible to contemplate. Well, I don't have the answer to this, but I think that these other groups of people, the people who are disturbed by racism and sexism and environmental destruction, what we can bring to this dialogue is more than a persuasive argument. Because if persuasive arguments could carry the day, then the Sermon on the Mount would have marked the turning point, or, Gandhi or somebody else. What we bring is an actual pharmacological intervention into the unconscious side of the human experience. I think the reason shamanism endured for 500,000 years without generating profane history is because it created a sense of self-worth in people that caused them to not need to build enormous earthworks or enslave other people, or even carve jade and wood, because the inner worth was felt to be sufficient. We are the most individually impoverished people the world has ever known. All our self-worth comes through social status, ownership of things, the size of our bank account, so forth and so on. So I think we need to demand of ourselves a greater political awareness and a greater willingness, and I'm not faulting this group because I think we're at the cutting edge here, but a greater willingness to stand up and be counted. The dominator paradigm has us locked into where we are pleading for our right to take psychedelics. This is, and then we say to ourselves in some of our conversations that the Holy Grail would arrive if they would allow us to take psychedelics. This is a cockamamie notion. They should be pleading for an exemption from the obligation to take psychedelics and be connected into the Gaian mind.